There's something rather wonderful about making your own sketchbook. Not only can you control the size of it, you can control the sort of paper you put in, you can mix it up, and there's the pure joy of creating something absolutely unique that's in fact as unique as your art. So I'm going to show you over the course of the next few films 4 different sketchbooks that can be made very easily with some paper, some glue, scissors, a sharp knife. We're not going to use needles and thread and those sort of bookbinding specialist equipment. These are books for artists, so they're quick to do, fun, and can be as beautiful or as plain as you want. Let me show you. This is called a perfect bound sketchbook. And that's nice because it opens flat, so nice for working in. This is a concertina sketchbook, which is lots of fun. I've got 2 concertina sketchbooks I'm going to show you. One has special pockets in. It's made out of one sheet of paper and that's not stuck together. This is made out of strips of paper that are stuck together with tabs. Of course, you can put in an optional pocket, whatever you want. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways of making that accordion sketchbook. And then I'm going to also show you one using binders, but you can just use ordinary wire. And that's lovely because you can use it over and over again. You can take pages out really easily. You can mix it up. And that's a really easy, nice book to make. So my name's Liz Chadderton. I'm a professional artist based in Berkshire. And every week I bring you a tip or trick that I wish someone had told me about ages ago. And this week it's all about how to make your own sketchbook. Just before we start making the concertina sketchbook, I want to tell you why I think it's such a lovely sketchbook to work with. I've got a couple of examples of commercial ones here, and these are from a company called Sea White. This is a little tiny one, and you can see why it's called a concertina sketchbook or an accordion sketchbook. Just got a plain hard cover, and this is actually made out of cartridge paper, and if I can show you, it's actually double folded. Can you see that? So I'm not sure what the weight is, but it's actually double folded. So it's quite a sturdy little book. And you can just imagine that fitting in your pocket. And that comes with a little slip case, which is lovely. This is a bigger version. And so the reason I love concertina sketchbooks is that you can tell a story. And they're great for display as well. So, for example, we were on holiday in Sidmouth and we were staying in the basement flat of this wonderful Georgian terrace. It was called, Fortfield Terrace, and the Tsar's sister used to stay there 100 years ago. Not in our house that we were staying in, good old Airbnb. Anyway, I thought while we were there, wouldn't it be lovely to actually draw the whole terrace? So I started with ours, and my plan was to do one each day. We were only there for 4 or 5 days, and I actually only managed 3. But my plan was that it would go on and tell the story of that terrace. And the other thing is it's really flexible. So this is also sitting at the same time and down on the beach. So you can draw on 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, whatever you want to do. That helps you tell your story. So very flexible and great for a time period. And this was actually the first one I ever made. And I used it to tell the story of a day. I was in Umbria, in a beautiful place called Orvieto, and I decided to tell the story of my day. I spent my entire day sketching, and I sketched lots of just little ones. They were all sort of half-hour sketches, I guess, in this particular day. Some of the streets, my view while I was having my lunch, very tasty if I remember. the main market square by the big cathedral. Just a beautiful archway I saw. And this was actually the view back where we were staying, which was outside Orvieto. So in that concertina sketchbook, I have the story of my day. What we need, let me tell you. First of all, we need the paper to go inside. That seems obvious. It could be cartridge paper, watercolour paper, you could do it with pastel paper, whatever surface you're going to be working on. And then you also need a hard cover, and again we'll talk about options for that in a moment. You need a decent sized working space because we're going to be using a big piece of paper and cutting it, so it's easier if you can spread yourself out. You need to protect the surface. You need to potentially need a cutting mat if you've got one. And then tools wise, a ruler, pencil, something to cut with. So either a sharp knife, scissors, or even this is a slitting knife. This is a proper bookmaker's slitting knife, but you don't need one of those. For folding, this is what bookbinders use. It's called a bone folder, but you could just use the handle of a knife or indeed the handle of your scissors. I'll show you that. We need some glue because even though it's folded, we've got to stick the covers on, something to put the glue on with. Bit of newspaper to stop the glue going everywhere. And then this is actually the inside of a cereal packet, but really useful because it's non-stick and it'll stop all the gluey paper sticking to itself while it's drying. And that's about it, so I think we should probably get on. Right, I'm going to use cartridge paper in my folded sketchbook. So I have an A1 sheet of cartridge paper here. I'm not sure what weight it is, and I've just checked the package and it doesn't actually say, which isn't overly helpful. But for sort of pen and wash, I would guess this is a couple of 100 grams per square metre, so that'll be fine. You could of course use watercolour paper or whatever you want. And we need to decide how big we want our book to be. This was made by cutting a sheet this size into 3 strips. So I think that's good size, and I'll do that again. So we need to cut this paper, say, into 3 strips, and I'm measuring it. It is 59.5 centimetres. So let's have a think. 19 3/4. That's our measurement, and I am going to bring this straight edge up to those 2 marks and fold it over. Now, the more accurate you are with your folding, the neater the end point. You can see this fold here. We need to make it sharper. Now, a bookbinder would use this bone folder and run it along that edge to make a really nice sharp fold. You've probably not got one of those, so you just use anything that won't mark. You could use the end of a knife like that, or let's find a pair of scissors. Even the handle of the scissors is enough just to make a really sharp fold. I'm going to turn that round, open it out, and then bring the other edge onto that fold. Again, being as accurate as possible. And then fold that in. And just as before, make sure that edge nice and sharp. And you can see I've folded my paper into 3 strips. If you wanted to do a smaller book, you could fold it into 4 strips, which would be a lot easier. Fold it in half, half again. You could do it into as many strips as you want. You now need to divide it into 3. I'm going to use this knife just to slit. You could of course use your scissors. You could just rip it if you like a ripped edge. If you were doing this with made watercolour paper, a deckled edge might be lovely. I did that too quickly, so I've made a bit of a mess there and I'll need to sort that out. So here are our 3 identical pieces of paper. But what we need to do is stick them all together to make one long strip. And the way we do that is by making just a little tab at the end of each one. So I'm going to use this ruler. That's possibly a little bit wide, but it's quite convenient. And I'm just marking it with that point because that makes it very easy to fold over. So that's one tab sorted. Let's just show that it's easy to do with something else. So I've got my scissors. Just do the same. I could just use the back of the scissors, run it along like that, fold it over, use the handle of the scissors to make that nice sharp fold, put that there, and then use my bluntish knife. So it's just an old sort of kitchen knife, like that. Just run along, fold it, and then use the handle of that knife. And then I've got 3 tabs. And all I do is place one strip inside the other, glue it, do exactly the same at the end of this one, glue it, and then I will need to cut off the final tab because otherwise the last sheet will be a little bit longer than everything else. The easiest glue for this is actually to use a glue stick. Of course you could use PVA glue, but it's just a bit more convenient. And again, it's all about trying to line things up as accurately as possible. Right, let's cut off that final tab. Obviously, you could use 2 sheets of paper and have 6 long strips together and make a really huge concertina book. You can go on as long as you want. So here's my super long strip, and we now need to fold it. I'm going to fold each one of these into 6 so that I will have 18 sections. So I carefully line up the first piece of paper in half. That is really easy. And you'll know the routine by now. Really smooth down that edge. Each half is 40.5 centimetres. So I'm going to divide that by 3, which is 13.5. I'm going to bring that edge over and I've got my first fold. I can then bring this folded edge to the centre and I've got my second fold, and again just smoothing everything down, and you can see how that has started to form the concertina. The more accurate you are with your folds, the better the final book. Don't worry about which way it's folding at the moment because you can easily turn it round. Where's the end of the paper? I'm going to fold that paper in half. In fact, while I'm there, I might as well fold that one in half. on, just making sure that fold is as sharp as possible. Makes it a bit more manageable once you get it down to this size. When you've got all your folds done, you'll have a strip something like this. Now, you want the tabs to be invisible, so that is the back of your book. Can you see that tab you don't want showing? So that's the back of your book. I managed to put a fold in totally the wrong place, so do concentrate. It's very easy to get confused, and I was trying to do it for the camera, got myself confused, and I've got a dodgy fold. So I'm just folding it backwards and forwards, so that I've got my book block. If any of the folds are not as sharp as they should be, just go over them at this point. So let's put our book block to one side for the time being and think about our cover. So on this example, can you see that the cover is slightly larger all the way round than the papers? And the purpose of that is to protect the paper. Traditionally, bookbinders use this. It's called grey board because it's board and it's grey. Very imaginative. You could use that, but you could take the back off. You know, if you've got an old sketchbook that you've pretty much used, you could just use the back off an old sketchbook. That would be fine. The quickest cover, this is an old bit of mount board. So you can often get these offcuts from framers. They've cut the mount out, so they're happy to see the back of these middle bits, and that makes an instant cover, which is great. If you use grey board, you might want to cover it in a decorative cover. This is a commercial sketchbook from Artway, and it's actually got a little hardboard cover, which I really like. So if you've got any very thin cardboard or MDF, you could cut that if you want to. I think we'll go for the easiest first, and that is just to use a piece of mount board. So you need to measure your page, and you can see I haven't folded this perfectly, but it's good enough. Each page is 13.5 centimetres by 19.5. Therefore, I'm going to add about a centimetre on each side. So I've measured my 2 blocks out, or covers out, just double check, because measure it twice, cut it once is not a bad maxim. And when you are cutting, if you've got a sharp knife like this, break off a segment so that you're cutting with the sharpest bit of the blade as possible. Don't expect it to go through in one cut. Just do multiple cuts and that will be more accurate. So now's construction time. You've got your front cover, and then we're checking our block to make sure that the hinges are at the back. They're not showing because we don't want that. Yep, that all looks good. And then we've got our back cover. And all we need to do is put glue here, stick that on, glue there, stick that on, and we're done. But we could do something a little more exciting, and I thought it might be quite nice to have an enclosure, something to keep it closed. So I wondered about putting a ribbon before I stick, because then I can tie it and it'll keep the whole book closed. So that's an optional extra. I can decorate the cover, and I've got some paper. I could just cut a strip and put it on and decorate it. That's entirely optional, but let me show you what to do. To stop us getting paper accidentally on the rest of the book, just put a bit of newspaper inside the front cover. I'm going to put glue onto the first page, because if I glued here I would probably glue around the edges, and that bit doesn't need to be glued because the cover is bigger. if we remember, than the paper. Be generous with your glue, but not silly. Then take out that gluey bit of paper and get rid of it. Got my cover, and then I can centre just by eye onto that cover. And can you just see that it's got a little overlap all the way round? So we can press that down, and that's our front cover. Then we're going to do exactly the same on the back. So we just pop that in there to protect. Put on as much glue as we think we'll be needing. Spread it out. If I am going to put my ribbon on, which I think I will, I'm going to fold it in half. I want the shiny side outwards. I'm just going to pop that there, and I'll need a bit more glue on top of it. Then I'm getting rid of my paper, and I'm again by eye going to get that there. And ideally you want the covers to line up, but because my block is a little bit out of kilter, I'm not sure how well those are going to line up. Got a little bit of time to move this around. Try not to fiddle too much. There we go. And you see, once that's dry, that can come over the front. We now need to put that under a heavy weight to dry, probably for a couple of hours. This is where those bits of cereal packet come in, because I don't want any surplus glue sticking all the pages together. So let's put that there, and that'll just stop any glue going where it shouldn't. So you might be wondering how to use the grey board, and look, I've used that back of the old sketch pad I showed you earlier. So it definitely needs covering because I've doodled all over it. Cut your cover to the size you need it. Remember putting that little bit of extra on, and then select whatever paper you want. Now this is scrapbooking paper, so it's quite nice and firm. You'll find if it's too thin, it'll go wrinkly once the glue's on it. What I've done is drawn around the cover, put a little bit extra at the side. What's that, 2-3 centimetres, 2.5 centimetres, and then I've mitered the corners, but not right up to the edges. I want a little bit because I want all that board covered. So what I could do if I wanted to make the folding a little bit easier, I could use, just score round on the paper. I say that's optional, but it can make folding just a little bit easier if you want to. I'm now going to glue right up to the edges. Say if your paper's a little, oops, we need to keep that steady, because what I don't want to do is get glue on the front of this paper. Carefully picking that up and getting a clean sheet, popping it down, and then placing my board in place. Now, starting with a short end, I'm going to fold that over, and then with my thumbnail I'm just going to nip that in at the edge there. Do exactly the same at the bottom. Fold it over, nip it in there. I then can come round to the long edge and fold that over. And you can see that the corners are all nice and neat and covered. No, none of that ugly old grey board is showing. Just do the same. And there, I've got one cover. Obviously, if there's a particular pattern, make sure you centre it. I didn't need to with that. And there are my set of covers. So that's really easy. What we now need to do is find more of that clear non-stick cereal packet, cover them, weight them down and let them dry really thoroughly so that they don't warp. And then you would use them in exactly the same way. And because you're sticking here, you won't see any of that at all. Thought you'd like to see the finished book. Now it's dried. So let's open it up. You can see I just stuck a strip of decorated paper on the front. You could print this, you could paint it, you can leave it plain. Do what you like. You're an artist. You make it your mind up. And there we have our accordion sketchbook. I just like putting the ribbon on because it stops it opening up. You could use an old shoelace. You could use a bit of raffia, anything just that's sort of decorative like that. But if you don't want to go to the hassle of doing that, just get a large rubber band and that'll keep it all together.